Hi, I'm Jim Bowley for JimBowley.com, and welcome to this video lesson on pick-style arpeggios. One of the things I've noticed in my teaching studio is that while fingerstyle arpeggios are typically pretty intuitive for guitar students, pick-style arpeggios are usually abused. And I think the reason for that is that there are just so many options that it's hard to know exactly how to execute them. So today our aim is to demystify the pick-style arpeggios and get you on the path to arpeggio awesomeness. Now this lesson is an accompaniment to the full lesson on my website. So please follow the link below this video to get the full text and the graphics. And one last note. This is my own personal method, but it's one that I've developed after studying lots and lots of other guitar players. So I think it's a relatively common one. I encourage you to please try some of the things in here, but of course your mileage may vary. Feel free to experiment. Let's get started. First, let's review a fundamental concept. What are arpeggios? Well, arpeggios are often referred to as broken chords. That is, chords that are not strummed in the traditional way, but rather articulated one note at a time. Now, arpeggios can come in ascending phrases, which is to say low strings to high strings. They can come in descending phrases, high to low. Or they can be randomly mixed around. There are really no rules. Now I use two guideline techniques for playing pick-style arpeggios. That is alternate picking and directional picking. Now how I employ these techniques though has everything to do with how the arpeggio is laid out on the strings. This is what I call the architecture or the arpeggio shape. Let's explore. The first method for playing pick-style arpeggios would be basic alternate picking, that is down-up picking, which you're probably familiar with. Now, just like in single note playing, like riffs and things of that nature, alternate picking for arpeggios still aims to place the downstroke on the number of the beat and the upstroke on the end. So if you're counting 1 and 2 and 3 and, your alternate picking would match that. I find that alternate picking works best with an arpeggio shape that is laid out in a back and forth manner. So for instance, you may have a note on a lower string, then a higher string, lower string, then a higher string, like this E minor here. Here I have a note on string 4, then string 2, string 3, then string 1. Let's get a close-up of that. Now when the notes of an arpeggio are laid out in one direction, I like to use what I call directional picking. Some people may call this economy picking, some call it sweep picking, but I like to call it directional picking with my students because the name says exactly what we're trying to accomplish. We're moving the pick in one basic direction and following the series of notes the way they're laid out on the string, either from low to high or from high to low. Now, one of the most common arpeggios is an ascending arpeggio from low to high. And in this case, it makes perfect sense to use directional picking in all downstrokes because the downstrokes will follow the succession of notes, like with this E minor chord here. Again, let's get a close-up of that one. Now at first glance it seems that all downstrokes would be a perfect way to execute an ascending arpeggio. However, it's very common for an ascending arpeggio to be immediately followed by a descending arpeggio. And that would present us with a small technical dilemma, in that the last downstroke is taking us away from the strings. The next notes in line would be this way, and our pick is moving this way, so you can see what the problem is. So my strongest recommendation here would be to train yourself to reverse direction on the high note, like so. Again, let's get a close-up of that one. Now, when looking at the last example in isolation, you might think it's no big deal to reverse on the high note, and you would be correct. But when we look at the big picture of arpeggios, it becomes clear why it's a good idea to train yourself to reverse on the high note. It's that reversing on the high note sets you up perfectly for playing your descending arpeggio, like so. Now, it would be a perfectly valid question to ask, why not just play all downstrokes and then only reverse when you need to? And that's fine, you certainly can do that. But to me, it has just always felt superior to reverse on the high note, and I think it's also a good mental cue to give yourself, that if you always reverse on the high note, you never have to wonder. Again, it sets you up perfectly. Let's take a closer look at that. Now, the above examples all had a long note of some type that kind of broke up the phrase and gives us a little more freedom in how we approach the picking. But what happens when we have continuous arpeggios that keep moving from note to note? Well, then it's even more critical that we use some sort of strategic reversal. Now, strategic reversal is a little term that I coined just to indicate that we have to reverse at a strategic point. We've already talked about reversing on the high note. That's one type of strategic reversal. But in continuous arpeggios, we usually have to reverse on the low note as well. A nice pop example of this might be the riff to the song 8675309 by Tommy Two-Tone. If you're playing that one, if you do not reverse on the high and reverse on the low, you can kind of get stuck because this one just keeps coming at you. Let's do a little close-up of the right hand so we can see that one again. So as with most things in life, arpeggios are best handled on a case-by-case basis. Now, it would be nice if there were some really strict rules and guidelines about how to do these things, but really there's no single method giving all the possible permutations of arpeggios. I'll often mix together alternate picking with directional picking, and sometimes in the same phrase. A good example of that might be the intro riff to More Than a Feeling by Boston, where I'll start with alternate picking and then I'll do some directional picking afterward, kind of like this. Now, I hope that kind of drives home the point that you have to, in order to play arpeggios well, you have to analyze the entire phrase and then determine which techniques will match up best with which arpeggio shape. Let's take a close look one more time at that More Than a Feeling riff. Hey, thanks so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you got some good information here that's going to help increase your awesomeness with pick style arpeggios. They're super common, so you got to get good at them. Please make sure to check out the full lesson on my website at jimbowley.com. You can follow the link below this video, and I'll see you next time.